Hi, I'm Nikki from Teaching Autism and welcome to the Autism and Special Education Community Podcast. Are you an autism or special education professional? Are you a teacher or therapist looking for support and new ideas? You may even be a parent, family member or carer. This podcast is perfect to help you find out more information, support and get some of your questions answered. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of my Teaching Autism and Special Education Community Podcast. Today on the podcast, I am talking all about how to use prompts with your students. I get a lot of questions almost every day from people who are confused about whether they should use prompts, if they're good, if they're bad, if they're over-prompting, and so I thought I would just put together a really quick podcast episode for you to listen to. So first of all, what is a prompt? Well, a prompt is just a strategy that is used in order to help correct a student while still encouraging and working on their learning and leading towards independence. A prompt usually takes place after an instruction has been given and before a response is shown or a skill or activity is completed. When I talk about prompting, a lot of you will reach out to me and ask, how do I know what prompt to do? Am I prompting too much? Am I prompting too little? And this is where it gets a little tricky because in some situations, you will start with larger prompts first and then fade them out less and less. So going from a hand over hand physical prompt and then work down towards being independent. But there's also times where you may start with a smaller prompt. For example, you may ask a student, come here. And you may find yourself giving that instruction, but not giving a huge amount of prompting yet. You're not going to go to the highest level of prompt. You're not going to physical prompt them. You may just pause and give them a little time to process it. You may give them an indirect non-verbal prompt next, but you're going to work from least to most with situations like that. So the prompting levels that I have always worked with go as follows, and I'm going to put them in order from lowest level prompt to the highest. And number one is an expectant pause. So this is where you just pause slightly and give the student time to react or respond to you or to start working on an activity. So don't feel like you have to prompt straight away. You don't have to give the instruction and then instantly give a prompt. I tend to count either 5 or 10 really slowly in my head depending on the student before I offer any prompt, just to give them a chance to process what I've asked before I start that prompting. This is going to be individual for your students, and this is why I always say to spend those first couple of weeks at the beginning of the year getting to know your students, because it's going to pay off so much through the year when you know more about them on an individual basis. Prompt level 2 is an indirect non-verbal prompt. I know these can sound really sort of confusing when they have these names, but really if you just sit back and listen to those names again, they're pretty much self-explanatory. So this one is where you're going to use your body language in order to prompt the student. So you could use a facial expression. You could shrug your shoulders. Key here to remember is that it is non-verbal and it's indirect. Level 3 is an indirect verbal prompt. So this time, try and use an open-ended question like, what should we do? How can we fix that? What do you think we do next? This gives your student that prompt they need to do something while also still working on their independence and allowing them to work out what it is they need to do for themselves. Level 4 is requesting a response. So this is a more direct approach. Ask the student outright, what do you want? What do you need? And this helps them really think and process what it is that they need and then to give that back to you as well. Level 5 is a gestural prompt. So this is pretty much as it sounds. Like I say, most of these are pretty self-explanatory when you sit back and really listen to the names of them. So this one is you're just going to use gestures. So pointing, tapping your finger, gesturing with your hand. You can do these for a few seconds as well to really allow your student to understand what you're doing and process what that gesture is. 6 is a partial verbal prompt. So this is where you're going to start off the response you want. For example, you may have asked the student, where did we go today? If there's no response and you've worked your way up through the prompting levels, you could now say, you went to the, and trail off. Give them that chance to fill in the next piece. It could be when you're talking about dinner. What did you have for dinner today? And you may have worked your way through the prompts again. There's still no response. So you can start with, for dinner, you had, or I had, depending on which way your students like to carry on those sentences as well. Number 7 is a direct model. So this is where you are actually going to model the behaviour, action, response that you want from your student. So this could be maybe you're working on a counting adapted book. So you count the objects on the page, you find the number symbol, and then you place it in the empty box. Let's go for level 1 adapted book here. So the student will see exactly what you've just done. They'll have seen you use your finger to count the amount of objects on that page. Then they will have seen you find that number symbol from the baseboard. Then they will have seen you move that number onto the empty square on the page. All these things will help the student remember what you've done because they're physically seeing it as well. And remember, all our students learn in different ways. So you may have learners who prefer when they can physically see something happening. And for them, that's the best way to help them remember and realise what you need for them to do. So after this, pause and give your student the chance to try it themselves. They're going to be mimicking what you've just done. Finally, the highest one that you can provide is a physical prompt, and it's a physical one, literally physical. So this means hand over hand, although over the years we've also liked to use under the elbow and direct the student from the elbow as well. Sometimes hand over hand can be too much for some of our students, especially if they don't like to be touched or anything. So the elbow tends to be better for them, and you can work from behind with one hand on the elbow and lead them to where they want to go. You're physically helping them to complete whatever action, skill, or reaction you want from them after the instruction you've given. Now, unfortunately, with prompting, it is really easy to fall into a system where you just always prompt at the same level. And before long, you're pretty much doing it all the time for the student, and you're taking away their need for independence. This is what becomes known as prompt dependency. So this is where we've almost taught the student really that they need a prompt before they can start an activity or respond to you or work on a skill. Even if they can master it and do it 100% themselves, that's because they have become reliant on the prompting being there, and they rely on that prompt to know when to start. This is when it's a good idea to sit down and look through all the data that you have collected, and especially look at the prompting. What prompts can you start to fade out? What can you do to make those activities or skills more independent for your student with less prompting from you? Can you put any strategies into place that will remove the need for your prompting? This is where visuals and sequencing events can come in handy. One of my favourite ways to work towards independence is by providing errorless learning activities. So these help students to understand the process of work and what is expected of them in an errorless way. This does tend to reduce the need for prompts, especially higher level prompts, because it takes away the chance for your student to perform something incorrectly. Remember though, just because it's errorless, you may still need to start out with some of those prompts as your student starts to understand what they need to do and what's expected of them in an activity like this. This is one of those activities where I do tend to start with the least invasive prompt and then work my way up and then fade out after that. I'll also link to some errorless learning activities in the show notes for you that we love to use as well. So if you head on over there, you can grab some of those really great resources that your students, I promise, will love. And they're all errorless, so they work great for this. It's also important that you take the time to train the staff in your classroom or learning environment about the fading of prompts as well. Have a plan in place for how you intend to fade out those prompts, as well as how you're going to record them. So I find that the data collected from prompting is a great indication for how well my students are progressing, especially when it's working towards their IEP goals. Remember, our main goal that we tend to keep in mind is we want our students to be as independent as possible. So it's really important that when we work on our prompting, we share our knowledge and training with our staff around us so that we are providing the best support to our students to help them on their way to independence. That is my really quick overview today of how you can be using prompts in your classroom and ways to fade them out, as well as the different levels of prompting that there are. If you have any tips to share with us about prompting or have any questions, head on over to the show notes and leave a comment or question over there. Remember, you can head there as well for a bunch of helpful links and resources that will really help you with your prompting. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I really do hope you found it helpful to learn more about prompting and the different levels, as well as continuing to encourage independence and avoid prompt dependency with your students. Thank you for listening, and I'll speak to you again soon.